Every structural engineer uses formulas and equations, but not many stop to really read them. When you look at a formula properly, it starts telling you where the leverage is. It shows you what changes fast, what barely changes, and what actually drives the design. And that's one of the best ways to build real engineering intuition. So in this video, I want to show you how to pull formulas apart and learn to read them better. Most people learn formulas as something to plug numbers into. You get the loads, the span, the material, the section, and then you calculate the answer. And of course, that matters, but in real design, the bigger question is usually this: what should I change to improve the result the most? Should I increase the depth? Should I reduce the span? Should I add more bracings? Change the section? That's where formulas become much more than just equations. Let's start with a very simple example. Here I have a suspended slab supported on concrete beams. I've added some loads and run the calculations, and we've got a 11.5 millimeters deflection. Now, if I add a beam that runs here in the middle, make this beam half meter wide, very wide, but with exactly the same depth as the slab. So this beam is 150 millimeters deep, and this slab is also 150 millimeters deep. So this is basically what we've done here. We just added a beam that is the same depth as the slab. Now, if we run the calculations and check the deflection again, you can see that it barely changes. At first, that might seem strange because on paper, I just added a beam and potentially more reinforcement too. But this is where the formula starts telling us something important. So for bending problems, stiffness comes back to EI. So E is the modulus of elasticity of the material. So material obviously matters in this formula. For example, timber might have a modulus of elasticity somewhere in the low tens of thousands of MPa, say 10,000 MPa, 12,000 MPa, while steel is around 200,000 MPa, a lot more. So if deflection is a concern, steel has a clear advantage in terms of stiffness. But that's only part of the story. The other part is the second moment of area. So let's say, for example, for a solid rectangular section, I equals B h cubed divided by 12. Now, this is where things get interesting. Both B and H affect the result, but they do not affect it in the same way, because B changes linearly, H changes cubically. So if you double the width, I doubles. But if you double the height, I, the second moment of area, goes up by 8 times. And that should immediately tell you something important. If your goal is to make a beam stiffer, increasing the depth is often far more powerful than increasing the width. And that's exactly why the model barely changed. And the formula was already telling us that from the start. If stiffness is the goal, depth often gives you far more leverage than width. Hey, real quick, if you enjoy this kind of practical structural thinking, that is exactly the sort of thing we work on inside Bang Lab. But I'll be honest with you, one of my favorite parts of it is seeing the members actually make progress in their careers. We've got people landing jobs, starting new roles, getting back into engineering after a long career break. If you want to learn more about it, there's a link in the description. Now let's take that one step further and look at deflection. For a simply supported beam under a uniform load, the elastic deflection is 5WL to the 4 divided by 384 EI. Classic formula, you should know that by heart. And again, there's a lot hiding inside this formula. We have the load, W, we have the span L, and in the denominator we still have EI, which we just spoke about. So yes, load matters, material matters, section stiffness matters, but look at the span. L is raised to the power of 4, and that's huge. It means deflection is extremely sensitive to span. If you double the span, the deflection does not double. It goes up by 16 times. And that should immediately change how you think about long spans. Because sometimes in design, we keep trying to fix deflection by making the section a bit bigger or by adding more material, when the real issue is the span itself. Now, of course, in a real real project, span is not always something you can freely change. The architecture might already be set. But if span is what is driving the deflection, that is still very useful to know, because it tells you the real issue might be the structural arrangement, not just the beam size. So maybe the answer is a different beam layout. Maybe the slab spans the other way, or maybe you can introduce an extra support if possible, a secondary beam or secondary truss, or maybe that leads to a conversation with the architect, because if the project really needs a long clear span, then the structure has to pay for it somehow, and it's usually through more depth, more weight, more cost, or all three. So a lot of the time the real job is not just to size the beam, it is to help find the middle ground between span, depth, cost, and the architecture. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to overcomplicate anything, because at the end of the day, if it really needs a big span, you need a big beam, you need a deep beam, end of story. Let's look at another example. For a cantilever retaining wall, the bending moment from the soil pressure is often written as W squared divided by 6, and that's the formula for a cantilever beam with a triangular pressure. At first glance, that already tells us something. Even if W stays constant, the moment would still increase with H squared. So height is already a big deal, but in reality, for a simple active pressure case, W is not constant, because the earth pressure itself increases with the depth, increase with the height. If we say that W is equal to the density of the soil times the active earth pressure times the height, then we can substitute that into this formula. We now get that the moment is density of the soil times the active earth pressure times H cubed divided by 6. And this is where things get very interesting. The bending moment is now proportional to H cubed. So if you double the wall height, the bending moment does not double, it goes up by 8 times, and that is a massive jump. And this is exactly why retaining walls can get expensive very quickly as the height increases. A wall that is a little bit taller is often not just a slightly bigger version of the same design. It can become a completely different problem. You're gonna get more bending, more reinforcement, more footing demand, more overturning, more sliding. So again, the formula is telling us where the real leverage is. In that formula, height is not just another variable. It is the variable driving the whole problem. And that's useful because sometimes people look at a retaining wall and think, yeah, it's only a little bit taller. But structurally, that extra height can change everything. So when you read the formula properly, it trains your instincts. Now, of course, people might say, well, you cannot control the wall height. It is what it is. And yes, sometimes that is true. But if you have enough room on site, you might be able to terrace the ground and use a series of smaller retaining walls instead of one very tall wall. And that can make a big difference because the formula is already telling us that height is the variable that blows the problem up. Let's have a look at another simple example. The area of a circle is pi d squared divided by 4. And again, at first glance, it looks like a basic formula. But if you stop and read it properly, it tells you something important. Straight away, the area does not grow linearly with the diameter. It grows with d squared. So if you double the diameter, the area does not double. It goes up by 4 times. And that matters a lot in structural engineering because for a circular column, or maybe you've got a concrete board pier or a pile or anything similar, area usually links directly to concrete volume. And concrete volume links directly to cost, to weight, and construction effort. So when someone says, let's just make it a bit bigger, the formula is already telling you to be very careful because a modest increase in diameter can mean a pretty big jump in material. Now, of course, making the diameter bigger can also help you structurally. You get more axial capacity, you get more stiffness, you get more bending capacity depending on the problem. So I'm not saying increasing the diameter is wrong. I'm saying the formula helps you see the trade-off because the diameter is not a gentle variable here. It ramps up material quickly, very quickly. A good example is board piers. Sometimes increasing the pier diameter looks like a small change on the drawing. You know, maybe you change your pier from 450 millimeters diameter to 600. That does not sound dramatic at all, but the concrete volume can jump a lot faster than people expect. So for this simple example, let's say 600 divided by 450, you get a 33% increase in the diameter of the pier, but the volume of concrete increases almost 80%. Again, that is the kind of intuition that formulas can build. You stop seeing dimensions as just numbers on the page, and you start seeing which ones quietly drive the cost and scale of the job. Now let's go a bit further and look at column buckling. For pure Euler buckling, the critical load is pi squared EI divided by L squared. And again, there's a lot hiding inside this formula. We still have E, we still have I, and we still have L, which in this case is the unbraced length. L is the effective length. So straight away, the formula is telling us that if the unbraced length goes up, the buckling capacity drops very quickly. If you double the unbraced length, the buckling capacity does not halve. It drops to a quarter. That alone is already a very useful piece of intuition, because it tells you that stability problems are often heavily driven by geometry, not just by how much material you throw at the member. But there's another thing here that is even more interesting. Look at what is not in the formula. Fy is not there. The yield strength of the material does not appear in the pure Euler buckling equation. And that should make you stop for a second, because it tells you something very important. If a column is, let's say, failing in pure Euler buckling, then switching to a higher strength steel does not solve the real problem, because the issue is not the yield stress. The issue is instability. So again, the formula is telling you where the real leverage is. Maybe the answer is more lateral restraint, which will reduce the effective length. Maybe the answer is a different section with a better second moment of area. But if you are in the Euler buckling zone, simply paying for a stronger steel might not do much for you, because the strength of the material is not even in the formula, and the modules of elasticity of a lower strength steel is almost the same as a more expensive high strength steel. So in this case, you can say that a lower strength steel will produce same results as a more expensive higher strength steel. And that is a really powerful lesson, because sometimes formulas teach you just as much by what they leave out of the equation as by what they include. So this is another way structural intuition gets built. Okay, so what all these examples are really showing is that formulas are not just there to give you an answer. They are there to show you how the structure behaves. They show you which variables are doing the heavy lift, which ones grow fast, which ones barely move the result, and sometimes which ones are not even in the formula at all. So that is where a lot of structural engineering intuition comes from. Not just solving the equation, but learning to read it. So when you look at a formula, a few good questions to ask are: what variable has the biggest power? What changed the result the fastest? And what is the real leverage in this problem, and what is missing from the formula? And also, a lot of optimization in structural engineering should start exactly there, by reading the formula. Even before changing the model, before changing the section, before changing the material, look at the formula first. That is often where intuition starts, and that is also where better engineering judgment starts. I'll see you in the next video.